Hey everyone, Margarita here. This is going to be episode number 3 on my severe carbon monoxide poisoning. I had just given birth while suffering from it, and then the hospital had covered up everything that had occurred while trying to hold us hostage at the hospital with no intention of treating us or trying to assess what was actually wrong and the problems we were experiencing. They weren't even trying to address any of those situations. They just wanted to hold us hostage there, basically to run up a bill. And by not treating us, it would create further issues, which would then, add to the bill that they're racking up for us. So that's kind of what was going on. And there was several other issues, and I'll get into this in the future videos. I just want to get the base story out first. But there was several significant things going on during this labor and delivery and this hospital visit. Many things that were abnormal. Mind you, I'd had 2 other kids previously, years before. None of what I had experienced that day was normal, and we were in fight or flight mode, or at least I was, until I'd gotten us out of there and gotten us home a little over 24 hours later. So I will come back and elaborate more on some of these things I'm talking about in the base part of the injury, and I'll explain more into the future, but I just want to get the base part of the injury out. And some of these videos I am having to refilm because, like I said initially in the intro, you're going to notice the different speeds at which I deliver information, the different ways that I look while I'm filming, because these are all on different days. I do live chronically sick, permanently injured. I do have re-exposures and re-injuries along the way. All of these things play a factor in the way I deliver information and the way I look. So there's quite a few videos that I have had to redo, going back and reviewing everything that I've filmed. There was a certain section of videos I had filmed around a time where I was having a significant re-exposure, and you could clearly tell my brain was not working very well while I was filming. So I did just take those 7 videos out and redo them all together. It was too slow. My brain was too slow. It looked like I was on drugs, and I'd like to be a little more efficient when delivering the information. And I guess part of me is striving for perfection, but nothing's perfect, and perfection's never going to be reached no matter how hard you try. So I'm just going to go, let it flow and go with, each scenario as I'm going along, and try to put it together the best I can, with what I've got left and the way my brain works and how I'm forced to deal with things going forward. I'm just going to let it flow the best I can to deliver everything to the general population, who I believe needs a lot of the information that I have regarding carbon monoxide poisoning, the brain injuries, how the medical system works, what I had experienced. And I believe what I have experienced, it's going to change many, many lives along the way and in the future. So just keep that in mind as I'm talking, or if maybe some of what I'm talking about you're not interested in hearing, or it doesn't pertain to you, or you don't find my story interesting at all, that's totally fine with me. Click off and watch whatever does interest you. I'm not offended at all. I'm not offended if you can't handle the way I'm delivering information or my use of words, because I did not have speech therapy once I became severely brain damaged. I know some people can't handle that. So if you can't, go ahead, watch somebody else. And I won't be offended by it. I don't need rude comments in the comment section. I don't need anybody criticizing me, especially after everything I've already been through and what I've dealt with in the actual world and people in my real life. So I'm just going to put that out there. But this is episode number 3, picking up from us getting home from the hospital. I did manage to get us out of there after being in fight or flight mode. And as soon as we got home, it seemed that my condition had slowly been declining shortly after we got home. It was just so extreme, and it went to fight or flight mode immediately. And I finally got us out of there, and then I get home, and I'm just experiencing all these additional symptoms that did not exist prior to me giving birth, or ever prior in my life or prior to me stepping foot into that building that caused all of this. So some of these symptoms I was experiencing, it started turning into extreme hot flashes. I couldn't regulate my body temperature. I now know that that was due to the brain injuries and the carbon monoxide. They both caused that. So there was that. I was breastfeeding. I was in and out of consciousness quite a bit. My hemoglobin was about 6.2 when I left the hospital. So that does explain a lot of the in and out of consciousness I was experiencing during breastfeeding, mostly during breastfeeding, but it was happening, throughout the day. Because I was suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning in the after effects, just not knowing about it. Without having a prior medical history, that made it even harder to recognize that there was a significant problem. So that was going on. I did notice one of the very first symptoms that I experienced was not being able to work out anymore. And that happened right after the first shift I had worked at that restaurant at 30 weeks pregnant. And I was never able to work out again from that point forward. I did attempt to go back, I think it was twice after I had had the baby. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it again. I could tell by the way I felt something was very wrong. It was the poison coming out of my system, and the lack of oxygen I was experiencing was why I felt so significantly different when I did leave the gym those couple times I had attempted to do this. But I did end up having to make a phone call and cancel my membership, and I just wasn't aware at that time what was causing all this. I just said, look, I had a baby. I don't think I'll be returning. Something's wrong. And I think he just thought like I was sore from having the baby. And didn't realize, no, something significant had happened, and I don't know what it is, but I highly doubt I'll be able to come back. And it's still that way today. It's been almost 9 years, and I still have not been able to go back to the gym. So I was pretty correct about where I laid in that moment with that. The choking problem with the baby, that remained pretty prevalent the first 3 years of his life significantly, especially as a newborn. That was going on regularly, numerous times in a day. But with me falling in and out of consciousness, breastfeeding him, I almost suffocated him with my boob a couple of times because I myself was losing consciousness. And then he was having the choking problem just from swallowing and not having enough oxygen to the brain is what causes that. So that was all going on. We were picking up small amounts of little bits of carbon monoxide going, wherever we were going. We weren't going many places, but just the little bits out and about in the world because our hemoglobin was so low and we were already poisoned by carbon monoxide and had had brain injuries while suffering from it. It was just not known yet. Those little bits of carbon monoxide that we were picking up were playing a significant role in the decline of both of our conditions after returning home from the hospital. And that continued on for, a couple of years, several years, until we began treatment 3 years later. So I did end up going back to work as a self-employed individual. I ended up going back to Detroit. I think it was Memorial Weekend. And I had every intention of going down to work in Ohio after having the baby. I did not plan on coming back to Detroit. And I didn't feel good. And I didn't look like my normal self. I couldn't get my weight back in order. I wasn't overweight. I was always extremely fit. But due to the circumstances, the overload of the carbon monoxide, and everything that had happened due to the carbon monoxide caused my whole system and body to be out of whack, where I could not restore my actual body weight and my health to the manner in which I've always had it. So I didn't feel comfortable going to Ohio. And I had been to Ohio numerous times over the years and worked. So this would have not been my first time around, but that's what I had planned to do. I had not planned on coming back to Detroit whatsoever. And I did go back to Detroit because that's where I was comfortable. I was also breastfeeding still. I was only able to be gone a limited amount of hours before the milk would come squirting out everywhere. So there was an issue. So I was, just barely doing it, but I was doing it. I was holding on. I did start having the flashbacks immediately upon giving birth to this baby. And these flashbacks started around the time I was 18, 19, probably around the time I had my oldest child, and then backwards in time from there to the time that I was a child. And I had no knowledge that I was actually missing any memories. I don't remember missing any memories. I never felt like I was missing any memories. But uh, the flashbacks started immediately upon giving birth. And they continued on all while I was breastfeeding, all while I'd be all day, every day. Basically, that went on until I had been treating for about 1.5 to 2 years. So it wasn't until about 2020 when these flashbacks finally stopped happening. Once my brain tissue reached a certain degree of repair with all the treatments, that's when the flashbacks started to cease. But it did go on for about 4 years total. And with those missing memories, what had clicked was the decades of ongoing crimes that my mother had been committing behind the scenes. I had always known something was wrong all along the way, but I was always very healthy and high functioning. So it wasn't as easy to figure out when you're that healthy and happy and functional. And until you end up in a position where you're compromised to the degree I was. That's what caused it all to come out. So between the flashbacks, her actions during my injury, it all started to come together and become pieced together of what she'd actually been doing all these decades behind the scenes and the crimes she's actually committed. And with those flashbacks, I directly remembered some of these crimes. So I'll get more into that in the future. I never regained any type of daily functioning, not the regular type of, not at all. I still to this day don't have the daily functioning. So after having the baby, it's still that way today. The baby's almost 9. I do not have daily functioning. It's due to the carbon monoxide poisoning. It's due to the brain injury. And I never got the daily functioning back just after the one brain injury. So each one got added to the pile and made it much worse. So that is part of the reason it is that severe still to this day, why I do not have daily functioning. I was actually losing functioning after I got home with the baby. I'd always driven my older kids to school most of their life, or all of their lives. I drove them to school. By then they were 11 and 14. I did have to make some changes. I did have to switch their schools around, make it so they could take the bus. I realized I didn't know what was wrong, but I realized I was going to have to take something major off of my plate. And that took a significant portion of my time and energy, taking them to and from school all those years. So I did have to remove that from my list of tasks regularly. And from that day forward, they did remain taking the bus till they finished school, or they did some homeschooling as well. So that did have to happen. I ended up having a lot of balance issues. I took a really bad fall when my baby was 5 months old, and I had fallen so hard on my butt that a couple inches above it had snapped. My spine had snapped just slightly to the left of my spine and crushed it right there. And it never recovered. That spot never recovered. To this day, I still have a permanent problem due to this all these years later. And part of the reason the recovery was so hard for that was because my body was suffering from a lack of oxygen overall, from not having enough hemoglobin, from being overloaded with carbon monoxide, numerous factors that were preventing enough oxygen to getting, where it needed to go. You need oxygen to heal. So if you don't have proper oxygen, everything's going to be hurting, especially if you have a really bad injury. And I was not receiving enough oxygen to restore that injury in my back. And even once I did treat and do all this and that, yes, it went a significant portion healed and moved forward. But there is permanent damage to that spot from that one single fall. I had been stumbling around all over the place since having the baby, still not really realizing why this is going on. It was not an issue prior, but because the brain injury had gotten covered up, there was not really any answers in that moment. I ended up figuring this out all backwards. I did end up returning to the restaurant when the baby was 7 months old. So end of 2016, it was November 2016 is when I returned, and had the baby March 30th, 2016. So it had been a significant time since I'd been away. Returned to the restaurant, and I was only there on the weekend. So my shifts were spaced out. I was not there all week long, and I was there back-to-back shifts on the weekend. Now that played another role in why it went so long unnoticed what was actually going wrong as well. And shortly after returning, I did have a customer tell me that the restaurant was shut down the previous week for high levels of a certain gas. They did not mention the name of the gas. So this comes into play a little bit down the line when I figure this out. But I'll be back with another one. Thanks. Bye.